So in this episode, we're going to be reviewing episode 1 of the Are You Afraid of the Dark miniseries. But before we begin, if you enjoy this channel and want to help it keep going, go ahead and click the join button down below this video and sponsor this channel today, because YouTube no longer wants to monetize anything that has to do with horror. So it's pretty much up to you all to keep this channel alive. And with all that said, let's get started. So before there was Goosebumps, there was Are You Afraid of the Dark, which was a kids' horror anthology show on Nickelodeon in the 90s. And yes, I say for kids, however, some of those episodes were just terrifying as hell. And I know even some adults today that are still terrified by some of those episodes. So if you haven't seen Are You Afraid of the Dark from the 90s, go ahead and check it out right now. I'm not kidding, you will not be disappointed. And if you plan on watching this miniseries, you're going to want to check it out anyway so you know what the hell is going on. Now, this miniseries for Are You Afraid of the Dark is a limited miniseries, not a full-on TV show, but a limited miniseries of 3 episodes. Yes, unfortunately, there's only 3 episodes. However, there is a movie coming out, which we have discussed previously. If you don't know anything about that, go and click that link right there, and we'll be discussing that at a later date as well. Now, the Are You Afraid of the Dark miniseries premiered last Friday night at 7 p.m. on Nickelodeon, and if you were lucky enough to actually get one of my notifications for the early access, you were able to watch it 2 days before then. Which of course means that part 2 will air this Friday on October 18th, followed by the finale for the miniseries airing on October 25th, or next Friday. So before we go ahead and start the review, I want you to know that there will not be any spoilers, and if there are spoilers at any point, they will be saved for the end, or you will see this. And once you see this, you can simply go ahead and fast forward this part if you haven't seen it, and then you can avoid any possible spoilers. Now, with all that said, let's start our review for story 1. Submitted for your approval. Now, Submitted for Your Approval was actually directed by Dean Israelite, who actually directed the new Power Rangers movies for 2017, and that was phenomenally directed, and was written by Ben David Grabinski, who hasn't really written anything, but he is writing the upcoming Are You Afraid of the Dark movie. Yes, that's right, the movie. And if you didn't see the video I did on that, go and click the I, and then once that drops down, click that video. Now, part 1 is starring Liliana Ray, Sam Ash Arnold, Mia Sheck, who was actually an extra on American Horror Story, Jeremy Taylor, who was actually Ben in the It remake, and Laura Bertram, who actually starred in a couple of the stories from the original Are You Afraid of the Dark series. She played Amanda Cameron in the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, The Tale of the Lonely Ghost, and Laurel in The Tale of the Mystical Mirror. Now, she actually plays the mother in the story. Now, the first episode is about a girl who moves to a new town and is having terrifying dreams about a man in a top hat. And while dealing with these terrifying nightmares, she moves into a new school and meets a new group of people with similar interests, and they invite her to a secret society. But does she have what it takes to become a member? Which brings us to the ratings. Now we're going to go ahead and start off with the acting, which I'm going to give about a 6 out of 10 because the acting was pretty decent for the most part, and it was exactly what you would expect from one of the episodes from Are You Afraid of the Dark. It was set par, so if you actually really enjoyed the acting from Are You Afraid of the Dark and you thought it was perfect for that type of show, then it's going to be perfect here as well. However, the little girl from the story, Nevis Unipan is how I think you pronounce her name, she was phenomenal in the part. Her eyes, everything about her, she showed emotion through her eyes and her face. It was just great acting. I think this little girl is going to turn out to be a really good actor when she grows up. And of course, we had our lead actress, Lillian Way, who plays Rachel, and her acting when it took place in the normal part of the story during the daytime was all right. It wasn't anything phenomenal. However, when she acted in those nightmare scenes, she was brilliant. I don't really understand what the hell happened between the daytime regular parts of the story and the nightmare scene, other than maybe she was genuinely terrified when she was acting in the nightmare scenes. But holy crap, you could not ask for a better performance during those nightmare scenes. It was perfection. Next up is the plot. Now, the plot I went ahead and gave a 7 out of 10 because it reminds me of the old Are You Afraid of the Dark episodes. It was actually really good and on par with Are You Afraid of the Dark. If you loved Are You Afraid of the Dark, or at least enjoyed it, you're really going to enjoy or even love the Are You Afraid of the Dark limited miniseries. Now, this plot is actually very predictable, or at least it was for me, but there are some nice little twists that they throw in along the way, even though those twists were even somewhat predictable. But again, the plot is absolutely perfect in keeping the Are You Afraid of the Dark series feel. Next up, special effects. Now, the special effects, I'm going to go ahead and give a 10 out of 10, but you got to remember there wasn't a whole lot of need for the special effects in this first episode, but where there were special effects in those few parts, they were perfect. They had a nice scary tone. They were done in somewhat of a realistic way, and I actually thought the special effects were pretty damn good. So, a 10 out of 10. I really enjoyed the special effects. Again, there wasn't a lot of special effects, but where it was done really well. Next up, gore, which I'm going to go ahead and give an 8 out of 10. Now again, if you're new to my rating system, I base the gore not on how much gore there is in a particular episode or movie, but how it's used or what's called for in that particular story. So if it's called for certain amounts and it's perfected and the gore was exactly what it should have been done in that particular scene, then it's going to get a very high score. I'm not looking for something like the elevator scene in The Shining where I'm just looking for a ton of blood and gore everywhere. I'm talking about its usage in that particular story. And with that said, it was used almost perfectly. You know, there wasn't a lot of gore in this episode, and when it was there, it was used perfectly. It wasn't over the top, it wasn't underused. It was exactly what you would expect from those particular scenes. So for that reason, I'm giving the gore an 8 out of 10. And next up, memorable characters. Now, memorable characters, I'm going to go ahead and give about a 6 out of 10 because Mr. Top Hat was the main character in my mind when I try to remember something from this miniseries. And I gotta be honest, he wasn't fully memorable. I mean, he just reminds me of somebody I would see in a regular horror movie regarding a circus. You know, that's all I really got from him. When I try to imagine him amongst other circus-style horror movies, they get kind of mixed together and I can't really tell them apart in my mind. So there wasn't really anything truly memorable. And as far as the other characters go, such as the people from the Midnight Society, there was nothing really memorable about them, honestly. You know, if I go back and I remember Are You Afraid of the Dark, and I don't try to remember things such as the clown or anything along those lines, I remember Gary. Gary's one of my top 5 things that pop into my head as far as memorable scenes or moments or even characters from the Are You Afraid of the Dark series. And Gary, to this day, I still remember that guy. He's a very memorable character. But unfortunately, the characters are not insanely memorable for me. So for that reason, again, I'm going to go ahead and give it about a 6 out of 10. Which of course brings us to my favorite part of my rating system, the woke narrative. And the woke narrative didn't exist. So again, 10 out of 10. Again, if you're new here, the woke narrative means that basically if they're using a forced political agenda, so essentially the writer or director has personal viewpoints as far as, you know, politics go or anything along those lines as far as the woke or SJW narrative, and they force it upon you. They want you to think a certain way. Not if it actually calls for it. If a story calls for those specific things and it's used correctly, I don't fault that at all. What I fault is when they force their political views on everybody, on the audience themselves. And in this instance, there was none. 0. Now, yes, there was a great view of diversity in the cast. That is not woke. They're not forcing any political ideologies on anybody, and it was done perfectly. I think they did great in this. No wokeness. 10 out of 10. Perfect. Now, of course, that gives this episode a total of 47 out of 60. Now, 47 out of 60 is actually a pretty damn good score. This episode was really good. It reminded me a lot of the old Are You Afraid of the Dark series on Nickelodeon. I really enjoyed it. There were the same great moments. However, it did have a different take, and we're going to talk about the spoiler section in just a couple of seconds. But overall, very well done. If you're a fan of Are You Afraid of the Dark, you're really going to enjoy this. Now, with all that said, let's start talking about some of the spoilers, and then we'll come right back. So here's your spoiler warning. This episode was actually very predictable, and I don't know if that was the writer's intention, but you could tell right from the beginning that this whole nightmare she was having was actually something that happened to her long ago, and she was suppressing it. And of course, later on, it comes out that that was actually true. And it even goes on to being so predictable that you could tell in the first 5 minutes that the whole story is about how this Midnight Society actually comes together. All the kids here and there that she comes across that they're showing. Again, I don't know if that was intention. It may be intentional to have shown that, but if it wasn't, it was very predictable. I mean, even the part where the love interest actually was walking with her. You could see on his face that he was testing her to see if she was actually going to tell about the Midnight Society or keep the secret. And of course, the problem with that, if it was intentional, was that it ruined the whole twist ending when they took the mask off of him for last, because they make you believe that it was the nerdy guy that helped her get into the locker, but really it was the neighbor or the love interest. And that kind of ruined the whole twist at the end. Again, I don't know if that was their intention or not, but it kind of just played out that way. Now, of course, the story took place, and again, you could tell that this whole nightmare was based on something that she suppressed, and later on you find out that yes, the parents' minds were wiped, the adults' minds were wiped of this circus, and basically it was coming to her, manifesting to her in her dreams, trying to recall those memories, and she doesn't recall it, but it is coming out, and she puts it in the form of a story. And that's what I thought. I thought maybe in the next episode or later on we were going to find out that it was a real story and she was manifesting this. However, they really jumped the gun really quick here, and by the end of this episode, the circus moves into town, and it was actually a little different play. I thought we were just going to find out about it. However, I didn't think that the circus was actually going to come to town and start killing everybody. But of course, that's just how it was. And even though this story was very predictable, I actually really enjoyed it. It reminded me a lot of the old school Are You Afraid of the Darks, and it kept that whole vibe. The story was just perfected the way it was, and all of the nostalgia was there perfectly. So, with all that said, even though it was very predictable, I can't wait till the next episode. But let's know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. Did you enjoy Are You Afraid of the Dark? Did it remind you of a lot of the old series on Nickelodeon in the 90s? Also, don't forget, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, hit notification box if you don't know if I've kick-ass shit such as this. And be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, because 150 likes on this video will get you another Are You Afraid of the Dark mini-series review on this channel. Also, don't forget, merch link down in the description below. Eat, sleep, / repeat the 4 essentials for any horror fan. And don't forget to join us at Discord, because that's where I'm going to have a kick-ass time in there. And as always, I'll see you next time.